Michael Meehan is with us this morning. Michael, that's Owen's assessment of where Mayo are, but where Galway at the moment? I mean, we're not quite sure if they're ready to take a step forward from last year's semi-final, or if actually last year's semi-final was about the level they're at. So good enough to qualify for it, but nowhere near good enough to challenge Dublin yet.
Yeah, good morning, gents. I just got the end of that assessment from Owen. I think there's a lot of people kind of feeling unsure about Galway. It's unlike last year. Last season we had the blazing run through the league, came up short in the league final, but they were very much in everyone's focus and everyone's mind's eye, and they were coming into championship in a very strong footing. This year it's much more quieter. The league was up and down. They did fine. They stayed in Division 1. They tried out a lot of new players. They were missing a couple of Kerfin players with the All-Ireland club run as well. And now over the last few weeks here in Connacht, the focus has been on the Roscommon and Mayo game. So that's probably, in terms of Sunday's fixture, I think that's good from a Galway's perspective, just to kind of keep the heat off them a little bit. But going forward, I think they have it in them to push any team this year. I really do. Everything has to go right. They have to have everyone on the pitch, and that's not something that they've had this year. They've had quite a number of injuries and a couple of long-term injuries to key players, and inevitably I think that'll have a big bearing on how their season unfolds if those players become available or not.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Comer's chief amongst them. I think he's got an ankle injury, so all too well about that. Like sometimes it feels like it's good, sometimes it feels like you're ready to go, and then you try it and it doesn't work. So, are they almost as well planning without him and saying that if he does come back, it's a bonus?
I'd imagine that's what's happening for this weekend, and win, lose or draw this weekend. There's either a 3-week break or I think a 4-week break to the 3 weeks to the qualifier, 4-week to the Super 8. So it's probably that's the target that the medical staff and Damien himself are probably working towards more so, because I just know he was making very slow progress during the league, no progress during the league, very slow progress since, and he hasn't tugged out or he hasn't played football since last year, so he missed all the league, all the FBD league as well. So he's a lot of ground to catch up. I know he's going to be in good shape physically, and it's just his sharpness, his touch, and it's his scoring and things like that. Once he can get enough done on the pitch, so I'd imagine the target there is if you could get to a qualifier, or if you could get to the Super 8, you're going to give him 3 games in 4 weeks to kind of find his feet. And really at that stage, if he's back, all you want is games. So that should be a big bonus for him if he's ready to take advantage of that come July, August.
We've seen a little bit of an evolution in football this year, Michael. Like, we look at some case studies like Tyrone and the way they've reformed their game over the first 6 months of the year or so. Has there been any reform in Galway in terms of how they've played?
I haven't seen an awful lot of it. I know that there is a there's a consciousness around it that their new coach that came in after Paddy Talley, Kevin Stritch is his name, that he was very much, attack-minded coach, and some of the work that they were doing was very much attack-minded. So I think that has been there for them all through the league. We didn't see huge amounts of it, being honest, but I'll go back to they were very much a skeleton squad for large chunks of those games. You would hope that as time has passed since the league, they've had a good bit of time to kind of to work on that, and albeit a couple of 2 championship games so far didn't set the world on fire either for them, but I would expect that they'll be pushing towards, unleashing their best players are their offensive players, and the more often everyone I think wants to see them getting more ball, getting more freedom, and being allowed to kind of rack up big scores. Fair enough, in doing that you may concede big scores, but I think I was happy individually to see the kind of shift that you've talked about for Tyrone and that throughout the league and other teams across the divisions, going a little bit more offensive, and I'd hope that Galway can embrace that a little bit more than they have in the past. Now the caveat is they've worked so hard and so long on their defensive system under Kevin Walsh's reign that is it going to be binned? No, it's not. That's still going to be the key cornerstone to everything that they do. Like, it has got them so far as well, so they're not just going to throw it out, but it's just kind of marry a little bit more of attacking freedom and fluency to it that'll give them a real chance to be competitive at the latter stages.
Are you seeing evidence of that, and from like even 5-minute bursts here and there across the last 3 or 4 months?
I have, to be fair, in different games, in a couple of championship games in league, but I kind of always saw that, Ger. That was always there. Every now and then Galway could put 5 or 10 minutes together and they'd really rack up scores. They'd attack from deep in waves and they'd play super football. We saw it against Kildare last year as well, I'm thinking, at times, and at different stages, but it was very much only in kind of fits and spurts. And have we seen it in much more for a longer period? Not hugely. You know, I'm thinking back to a couple of the games, the league games during the year, where, you know, Kerry, what was a struggle, but at times at the very start of the game, they did expose Kerry early on and just didn't capitalise enough with scores. So there was evidence on that occasion. Like, they racked up a fairly big score against Roscommon in league. I think it was St. Patrick's weekend, maybe. But then in other games like Monaghan and Dublin were much more cagey and slower. But even in that Monaghan league game, Ger, there was opportunity that, like, they soaked up 30-40 minutes of very slow, steady play. But then they were able to counter and hit and break and get a couple of really quick scores in minutes. And so it's in them. It's just, if they could be, I'd love to see them just being that little bit more open-mindedness, a little bit more trusting in what they can do when they move the ball fast, when they get their players to the pitch faster, and just really go at teams a little bit more.
Part of me wonders if they actually need the run into the Super 8 to be able to have the confidence that this is going to work for them. So you need the training that you get now in June, where the confidence comes, where the ball sticks, where everybody's as fit as they're ever going to be, and they're actually doing the things at that point at a high level, week in, week out. And so then it happens in a game, and that has a knock-on impact on the confidence, and everybody starts to believe this is our plan. Because if you try it in winter time, people aren't fully fit, the ball's a bit heavy, the ground's a bit thick. It's just much harder to implement a change of style when you don't have to.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose we saw Tyrone did it, in fairness to them, or what the evidence during the league was that they did it from going back to the All-Ireland final into the league, and how they were that little bit more direct, keeping men forward and going with long ball. But you're certainly right. It's this time of year, you know, that the players are just hopping. They can't wait to go training, and it's full focus on inter-county at this stage. And it's just there's a degree of seriousness creeps in as well. Like, there's a little bit of anticipation there, because there's a big game coming around the corner, Connacht Final, and then whatever happens there, you got to pick yourself up, or you've got for a backdoor game, or you've got your time run into the qualifiers, which is like peak summer. You know, you have 3 games coming up, so like that's really, the minds and the bodies are going to be so sharp in that time frame for whoever comes through on Sunday to plan and implement what they need to do, and then you get the 3 games in quick succession to kind of trial and error and see what works and hopefully improve and build on it. So it's primed for that, and I suppose we would hope to see if the injuries start to clear up for them. You know, it leaves Galway in a strong position to take on the next chunk of the championship.
The more we've been talking about style of play here, and the more it'd be great to see those Galway forwards thrive under a bit more freedom. There is still a part of me that looks at their opposition this weekend, and you look at the way Cathal Craig scored that early goal against Mayo, and you do wonder if actually just tightening up a little bit is actually the best way to stop this Roscommon team.
Yeah, Roscommon, in fairness to them, they always did, and even especially this year, but they have that ability to create space in the forward line. They look to play lads in, they look to take you on, they look to get big scores. We saw it last year in the Connacht Final. We saw it 2 years ago in the Connacht Final in Pearse Stadium when they blitzed Galway. Last year, the first half, you know, they were very much had us at 6s and 7s. And, you know, they did it again on Sunday. So I'm sure a big, as much and all as we might like to see a lovely free-flowing open game on Sunday, you can be sure that objective number 1 would be to shut down those spaces, shut down those Roscommon forwards, because, you know, when their confidence up, confidence is up, which I'm sure it is, they're not going to fear Galway or taking on Galway or their so-called defensive system, because they've unlocked it before. And I was even at the start of the year, the FBD League final, Galway took on Mayo and Tuam, and I was at it, or Galway took on Roscommon, excuse me, and Roscommon had a good win on that occasion. Now there was two January teams out, I suppose, but what was evident was how I think Galway in the two different halves went very much defensive in the first half, and it didn't work, so they had to come out and chase the game in the second half. So when 15v15 went man on in the second half, and in both halves, Roscommon were able to create the space and the scores, to widen the gap on Galway. So they have experienced already this year both styles of Galway play, albeit it was the last week in January when that happened, or maybe early February.
A victory here is unbelievably important for the rest of the season, because if you win, you get a crack against Dublin in the Super 8. But if you lose, you're in probably the same group as Donegal and Kerry, and that would suddenly become a group of death if it was Donegal, Kerry and Galway.
Yeah, I was just looking at that again last night. You're right. I suppose, and then Dublin are the elephant in the room in some ways, as to if you want to beat them, and if you cannot beat them, is it only likely that you can beat them once in a season, or can they be beaten at all? So, I don't not for 1 second. Are anyone considering? Well, you know what? If we lose the Connacht final, we're going to avoid Dublin. Maybe that's a good thing, because when you look at the other side and the form Donegal have shown, Kerry as well. The Super 8s are set up this year for some really competitive groupings, and the best case scenario is to go in in Group 2, I think it is, behind the Leinster winners, or with the Leinster winners, which is, I suppose, inevitable who that will be.
In the football parts of Galway, Michael, when the name Anthony Cunningham is mentioned, what's the reaction usually like? Yeah,
he's well renowned. I suppose we're a dual county, so everyone will be very familiar with him in terms of what he brought to the hurlers and how close they got. And the thing that steps out in my mind is how he never backed down, and his teams were very full of self-confidence and belief, and they were aggressive and tough. And we always, I think the clips when he's walked the line with Brian Cody on a couple of occasions there, that they've been face to face, and he hasn't shirked an inch on against Brian Cody. And I think that was very much part of him, and probably what he brought to the dressing room and to the players for the Galway hurlers. And I've no doubt that it's the same things, the same characteristics that he has brought, and we have seen them already in spades with Roscommon. I would have come across him on a schools level. He's based in Athlone. He would have helped out a little bit with a school in Moat there, Moat Community College, and we would have been playing them in challenges, and he was on the line a couple of times. So he wasn't heavily involved, but maybe doing a couple of sessions. But even at that stage, that was always it was a challenge match. We used to go over and play them every year, and even in that case, those challenge matches were the toughest games we played all year. So his kind of fingerprints were on that team as well. So he's very much brings that with him everywhere he goes, and so he's fairly well known. He's been involved with clubs around Athlone as well, and Galway club teams are always going in and out at Athlone, playing the clubs around there in the off season. And I think everyone has a good bit of respect from around here.
When you look at the Galway connection, two of the biggest stories this year, well, one of them anyway, Anthony Cunningham going in with the footballers in Roscommon is huge. Obviously Kieran Donaghy is going to be joining us in the show later on, involved with the Galway hurlers. Is this becoming more of a trend in your view, the kind of closing of the gap between the two codes in terms of the expertise that a person from one code can bring to the other?
Yes, certainly. There will always be those individual coaches on very much skills and tactical basis that will be maybe standalone to their code, but in terms of management and setup, or maybe that kind of thing, there's huge overlaps there. There's huge overlaps among setups. Putting it together, putting a coaching ticket together, which involves the medical, the coaches, the backroom, the dietitians, the performance coaches like Star, and things like that. So there's it's the same stuff over and over. We see is Doug Howlett down in Cork as well with the hurlers there. So the overlaps are there, and it's great to see, because I think the more you can, you might just pull a little nugget or a little something from a different code that that'll help revolutionise or add something to your setup. So I'm all for that. There was a long time when the trend was, 10, 15 years ago, the trend was to bring in an S&C coach who was probably from one of the provinces, rugby background, and certainly they did advance things at that stage, and it's just moved on from there.
Yeah, it makes sense. It sounds like you're not quite confident of a Galway win this weekend, that this is on a bit of a knife edge as far as the Galway supporters think. What's your actual prediction if we had to nail you for one at the moment? What would it be?
Yeah, I suppose there's no teams out yet. I suppose only the big talking point on our side in Galway here is Damien Comer, where he's at, but realistically I don't think he's in the mix at all. Paul Conroy has made a return, as well, and quite, a quick return to play from his injury last summer. Is he in the mix? Again, he hasn't a lot done yet, but you're looking at other lads for Galway. Sean Kelly, who's played a lot over the last 2 years. Declan Coyne, Killian McDade, back from his stint doing Aussie rules. He impressed earlier in league matches, but missed a chunk of the latter league with injury. So I'm kind of hoping that it would be a delight to see 2 or 3 new names on the team for Sunday, and the likes of those lads who are back, which would mean if they're going to be named, they've had a good run. There must be, if Kevin is going to make changes, he's going to be sure about them. That's kind of his nature, and I think if we had a strong panel, then you'd be very confident. But it's going to be tight. I think we can get through it in Pearse Stadium. I think we'll get through, but I think it's going to be really, really tight. Roscommon will not fear Galway, and it's the 4th time in a row that these teams are playing off in Connacht Finals, if I'm not mistaken, and Galway have won 2 from 3, Roscommon have won 1, so it's going to be a big swing. To win 3 out of 4 would be huge for Kevin and the lads, and it would be a massive statement. And then I think it was on your own show that I heard Liam McHale a number of weeks ago saying how he felt that Roscommon should have won all 3 of those kind of titles as well. So, and he was involved, and there hasn't been too much in it, bar the replay when Galway ran out big winners a couple of years ago. So it's very tight. It's very tight. I'm hoping that we're going to see the likes of maybe Martin Farrer, Cur Finn, who had a super campaign for Cur Finn. He came on and scored 1-1 against Sligo on the very end of the game. You could see a curveball like him thrown in from the start. He could bring a bit of physicality to the full forward line, which is missing without Damien Comer. And I think we'll get there, but I'm not putting the house on it.
Sounds like it's going to be a good game. Michael, enjoy. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Cheers, lads. Okay.